over my... Hello everyone, welcome to or welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lena and I make college and book related content here on YouTube, and today I'll be sharing with you all a large book haul. Obviously, the meaning of the word large is quite subjective, but December does tend to be the month where I get the most books because it is Christmas for me. It is also my birthday month, and it is also the month of finals, so my stress has increased a great deal and I'm able to justify buying books much more frequently than I would in any other month. Thus, it really ends up being the month where I am able to collect or receive the most books, and I'm so grateful for them, each and every one, whether they came from a family member or friend, and I'm really excited to share them with you all today. The first book I got was when I was still in France during my semester abroad. I experienced my birthday abroad, and so I decided to go out to some local bookstores on the day of my birthday and pick up some books, both for the sense of souvenirs from France, but also just for a happy birthday treat to myself. So the first book that I picked up was Le Petit Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, but I've never actually followed through with looking that one up. But this is just a little paperback cover copy, but it does have colored illustrations, which is something that I wanted, the original watercolors by the author himself. And I read this story back in the spring of 2021, and I fell in love with this book. I fell in love with the story and the writing, and I immediately became obsessed. So I knew when I went to France I wanted to get my own copy in French, because obviously my family owns a copy in English but not in French. So I'm so excited that I was able to pick this up, and it's just such a sweet, heartwarming story, and I'm glad I could add it to my collection. The next book I picked up was Notre-Dame de Paris by Victor Hugo, and this is a livre de poche, that like series or brand. So I got this for two reasons. I really need to read more Victor Hugo. I also want to read Hugo actually in French, because up until this point I've only read him in English, but I also wanted to get actually a livre de poche just for a souvenir and for memories, so I ended up going with Notre-Dame de Paris because I have not read this book by Hugo yet, and I wanted to read a new book by him in French and not be constantly comparing it to my knowledge of the same book in English. This is obviously a fairly well-known book and a very well-known story thanks to Disney and many other remakes of musicals and operas and things like that. So I don't really see the need to rehash what this book is about, but I'm excited to read it in French and see what I can get out of that. And the last book that I got on that day of my birthday in France was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I actually went to an English bookstore that I discovered a few weeks previously in Toulouse, and it was such a weird experience. The way the books were organized was so bizarre to me. It was very, very small. It was also interesting because the books had their prices in UK prices, what they would be in the UK, but when you went up to check out it was 3 times the price, because English books are much more expensive in France, especially when you're comparing them to the 460 euros I spent on Notre-Dame de Paris, and I spent like 24 euros on this about, which is a lot of money for just a normal paperback. I wanted to read Robin Hobb for quite some time now, and I decided to start out with this book because everyone was kind of recommending starting out with this trilogy, which is the Farseer trilogy. The book follows the main character Fitz, who is living in part of the 6 duchies. He is the illegitimate son of who would have been the king of Buckkeep, but unfortunately due to Fitz's presence, his father abdicates the throne and Fitz is left in Buckkeep all by himself to fend for himself, and he is taken under the wing of one of the stable masters, but he also starts to become trained as an assassin, because illegitimate children or offspring really are a threat to the throne unless the throne is controlling them, and so he is trained to be an assassin. However, Fitz's very own trainer is trying to kill him, and there are many other players who are trying to kill him, and Fitz has to navigate this all while struggling to really find who he is as a person and what his future will hold in life. I've actually already read this book, so definitely check out my December wrap-up, but mini spoiler alert, I loved this book, I was obsessed with it, and I can't wait to read more Robin Hobb. The next round of books came from a particularly weak moment that I had. The bookstore at my university was having 25% off online, and this included books. So when I was away in France and going through the struggle of finals and studying and stress, I decided to order books. And I kind of regretted it because I really got too many books, but I'm excited to add these books to my collection. So without further ado, the first book that I got from that collection of Brewer Bookstore books was Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I read this book for the first time my senior year of high school in my AP literature class, and ever since then I really wanted to reread it, mostly because I have learned so much more since I've read that book and become much more educated and more knowledgeable, and I also just think this book really deserves a reread because it'll be so much richer the second time. This book was published in the 1950s and immediately was a wildly acclaimed piece of literature. The protagonist travels all the way from the deep south all the way up to Harlem, and he is constantly met with these horrible situations as he is navigating the racism and the racial tensions within the United States in all of these different cities and towns across America. I don't remember a ton about it. I just know that it was so well written and conceived and so rich and deeply layered, and that's why I want to reread it, because I don't really think I gave it enough credence the first time I read it, also because I was reading it for a class and I was sick of that class at that point. But I definitely want to reread this book. Highly recommend it. And hopefully I'll get to that at some point in 2022. The next book that I got from Brewer Bookstore was The Night Watchman by Louise Erdrich. I believe this book follows multiple different perspectives, one being the Night Watchman, Thomas, who is part of the Chippewa Nation and works near the jewel-bearing plant near the Turtle Mountain Reservation in North Dakota. There's also Pixie, who works at the same plant, and her sister and her sister's child have since disappeared, and she is desperate to find them. This book is actually based on the story of Louise Erdrich's grandfather. This book explores so much. It is talking about the new Emancipation Bill, which is not really emancipation, that came out in the mid-1950s. It is exploring violence against women, especially in Native communities. It is exploring the identity of being Native and also the struggle for land and the dispossession of land across America. I really enjoyed The Roundhouse, which I read by Louise Erdrich about this time last year, and I also wanted to get this book because it is a winner of the Pulitzer Prize, and I really want to read more Pulitzer Prize books, so I definitely was glad to pick this up, and I'm excited to read it in the next few months. The third book that I got from the Brewer Bookstore was How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. This follows the stories of two siblings. Their father dies in the night and their mother is already dead, and together they must go on this journey to bury their father the way that their father wanted to be buried. Definitely a story of journey, of siblings, of love, of family, of identity. It talks about Chinese symbolism and storytelling, and I'm really interested in that as well. I've had this book on my TBR for quite some time now, and I've really struggled to find it in libraries, either because it is eternally checked out or simply because libraries don't have it. So when I saw that this book was available at the bookstore, I picked it up. I love sibling stories. I'm really excited to read it. I also, for some unknown reason, am a sucker for the Booker Prize. I don't know why. It just calls my name. I also really like the title and cover of this book, so I'm excited to get to this one as well. And the last book that I got from my Brewer Bookstore shopping adventure was The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen. This is another Pulitzer Prize winner, as well as receiving the Andrew Carnegie Medal and a million more awards. This book is highly acclaimed and well received. The protagonist of this book is a double agent. He is half French and half Vietnamese, and he moves to America as a spy for the communists. This is another story of family love and friendship. This book is definitely out of my comfort zone. I don't really read thrillers, and it is described as having the suspense of a thriller, and I don't really read mysteries or anything like that. It's not because I'm against them, they just kind of freak me out too much, so this book is definitely beyond my comfort zone, but I've heard so many wonderful things about the writing in this book, and also the themes and the story, that I feel drawn to it even though it's outside of my comfort zone, so I'm excited to read to this one. And I know that if I can't make it through, I can probably make my sister or my mom read it. And I just feel like, as someone who reads a lot, this book keeps appearing on lists that when I'm looking at other books to read, so I want to be able to say that I've read this book and form my own thoughts and opinions, and also just be hopefully blown away by how incredible this book is. The next book that I received was The Storm of Echoes by Crystal Dalloway. This was from my parents, I believe for my birthday, but it might be for Christmas. It's kind of hard to tell. But this is the fourth and final installment in the Mirror Visitor series, so I don't really want to give the synopsis of this book because I don't want to spoil the other 3 books. But I have been receiving these books every year for the past 4 years, and I am in love with this series. The 3rd book I was not in love with quite as much. And I'm definitely worried about this book because I've heard some not so great things about this. That being said, I'm really excited to read this book, conclude the series, conclude my little section of the bookshelf. It's a tradition for me to read it every single winter in December/January. I reread the series from beginning to end and then read the next newest installment. So it's a little sad that this will be my last year doing that, but hopefully Crystal Dalloway will come out with some new exciting works that I can pick up and be just in love with as this one. I love this book for a myriad of reasons. You can definitely check out my Goodreads to read my reviews. I love the characters in this book, the storyline, the plot, the original creativity of the world that this book is set in, and I can't wait to finish this series, and I'm so glad that I got this. The book that I got for Christmas from my parents was called Natashas Dance, A Cultural History of Russia by Orlando Fig or something along those lines. This book starts in 18th century Russia and goes all the way up to the Russian Revolution. It is not so much a history book or a textbook. It is much more interwoven into the literature and the art and the culture of Russia, and that is the way that the history of Russia is told through this book. That's really why I wanted this book, because I have said many times on this channel how much I love Russian literature and how much I am so interested and fascinated by Russian literature and really what makes it Russian, and I'm hoping that this book will offer some answers. The title of this book, Natashas Dance, is actually after a famous scene in War and Peace that I remember quite vividly. Natasha is dancing. She does not know this dance, but somehow she is able to do the dance just because of this sense of inner Russianness in her. And so this is something I've been trying to learn about and figure out and really go after for quite some time now, ever since I started this Russian literature journey. So I definitely am glad that I got this book. My mom also said she got it because she wants to read it, so I have to hide it from her for now so I can read it first. I'm just really excited to read this book, and I also just I'm always trying to read more nonfiction, and this is definitely a hefty nonfiction book with some fun illustrations, and I also am a sucker for the floppiness of this book, so excited to read this. Hopefully the next few months. I have so many books to read. This is the problem with buying a lot of books, is I have a lot of books to read. I am someone who hates having a long physical TBR around me. I have an immense TBR on my Goodreads, but I never really have a long TBR of books that I can physically touch and that are around me, because I buy books and I read them, and then I buy more books and I read those. So this is quite overwhelming to have this many unread books around me and know that I have to read them sooner than later. And the 10th book is another book that I got for Christmas. I kind of cheated in getting this book. It was a little devious of me. My sister and I were in the bookstore picking up books for the local elementary school's library, and then I saw this book on the shelf and I bought it, and then I thanked my mom for buying it for me even though she wasn't there, and then she wrapped it up and gave it to me for Christmas. So this is another Christmas book, but it is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I have wanted to read more Virginia Woolf since high school, but then when I read A Room of One's Own this past November, I became re-obsessed with Virginia Woolf, and I definitely wanted to read her works sooner than later. So I decided to pick up this copy because it was a used copy, so much more affordable in the bookstore than it would be otherwise. This is often considered one of Virginia Woolf's greatest works of fiction. It follows Mrs. Dalloway, or Clarissa Dalloway, I think is her name. Yeah. And she's really trying to pull together this plan. She's a socialite. She is living her best life, trying to put this party together. At the same time, she's reflecting on her past and her present and her future, and it's interweaving so many different new narration techniques which were considered quite revolutionary at the time and shocking. So I'm really excited to read this book. I know that my sister at the very least has read it, and so I'm excited, and she loved it, so I'm excited to read it as well. And I am a little annoyed though because I should have been more diligent in seeing how used it was, and it is much more used than I thought. There is quite a deal of writing in this book along with these random doodles throughout, and it's kind of off-putting, frustrating. Like, it's a lot for me, so hopefully I can push through and read this book. If not, I'll have to go to the library and read a brand new copy so it doesn't hurt me quite as bad, but I am excited to read this as well. The last book that I got is a gift from my other sister. It is The Flower Fairies of the Winter by Cicely Mary Barker. This is just a little book of poems as well as illustrations of fairies by Cicely Mary Barker. She is very famous for her flower fairies. We have these flower fairies that decorate my childhood bedroom. And so it's quite sentimental and special to me, and also it's the winter, which is my birthday month. It's just such a cute little tiny book, and so I really loved that, and my sister gave that to me, so thank you for that. That was a lot of books though. It was 11 books, I think. But thank you so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions, book recommendations, video recommendations, leave them down in the comments below. I believe next week will be my December wrap-up, and I need to read more so I can, you know, talk about them for my December wrap-up. But thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next week.